Yeah.
If everyone has had a chance to grab a quick bite to eat in between the panels, we're going to go ahead and get started with our second panel, Preventive and Personalized Medicine and Bioethics. Moderating this panel, we have Keel Fox, who's a student in genome sciences, and he'll kind of introduce the topic for you a little bit and also give you an introduction to our two distinguished panelists.
Okay, sure, I'll get started. This one. Okay, perfect. All right, everyone. Thanks everyone for coming, and this is a graduate student organized event, and of course, you know, we wanted to get a different moderator, but Billy Crystal couldn't make it, so I'll be here. No, I'm just checking. So today's topic is on innovation, responsibility in preventative medicine, and we have two experts in this field, and it's just a coincidence that they both anchored their boats in Seattle. This is sort of an epicenter for this type of technology, and a lot of the innovation that's gone on within this city has provided technology so that we could sequence the initial genomes of human beings. And so we're going to talk about a few buzzwords maybe you've heard in the news, such as personalized medicine and what we can do. And so basically a revolution is underway within the medical sciences, because we have reduced the genetic code to A, G, C's, and T's, zeros and ones, and it's happened simultaneously with the evolution of computational tools and bioinformatics and supercomputers, but these guys can speak more to that than myself. But first I'll introduce our first panelist, whose name is Wiley Burke, and she received both her MD and PhD from the University of Washington. She was the 2007 president of the American Society for Human Genetics, the chair of numerous working groups at the National Institutes of Health, including one that I personally was a fellow for a few years ago called CRGGH, within the National Human Genome Research Institute. She's published a plethora of articles both within the basic research field in high-impact journals, and papers that are concerned the ethical, legal, and social implications of those findings as well. So she's a very roundabout researcher and investigator herself. And she is the current chair of the Bioethics and Humanities here at the University of Washington. Our second panelist is Mauricio Flores, and he's a lawyer from Harvard University, and he's litigated cases in the Supreme Court system prior to obtaining his current position as the director of P4MI, which is something that he'll tell you about today, which is in effect as a subsidiary of the Institute for Systems Biology and the Ohio State University's Medical Center and Peace Health Hospital which is located here in the state of Washington. So I guess our first question, just to get it kicked off, and I'll start off with you, Wiley. If you could just introduce yourself, describe your research interests, and our first question will be, how do you feel about the promise and perils of personalized medicine and what that represents?
Well, just to tell you a little bit about my background, I'm an internist and medical geneticist, which means that I see patients in the genetics clinic with health problems related to genetics. But I also spend most of my time working on research, and particularly on the ethical and policy implications of genomic research. So I want to start in addressing the question that's posed to me by saying that I have mixed feelings about the term personalized medicine, or at least the way in which it's used. If you ask a class in the University of Washington, as I have done, what does personalized medicine mean? The answer typically is it means using knowledge of people's genetics to individualize care. I think that's what I might say, the standard answer for what personalized medicine means. I would argue that we need to step back and say, if we're interested in personalized medicine, we really need to broaden our horizon. So let me just comment on that briefly. Personalized medicine is taking all the tools that we have available to us to deliver health care, to improve people's health, and personalizing them to the individual. A lot of the ways in which we have to personalize healthcare aren't particularly molecular, aren't necessarily related to genetics. So for example, if you want to help a person who gets around in a wheelchair to have good cardiac health, you may be very concerned with what kinds of aerobic exercises are available to a person in a wheelchair. And I think we have to put our potential huge opportunities deriving from the Human Genome Project and the precision molecular knowledge that will derive from that within that kind of context. Just make one more point from an ethics perspective. What we also have to think about as any new technology comes in is not only where does it fit, but how do we make sure that we don't go overboard? How do we avoid overpromising? I believe molecular tools offer extraordinary opportunities for healthcare, but through an ethics frame, they are not necessarily addressing the most important healthcare problems in the country. As you may have seen in front page newspapers in the past week or so, infant mortality in the United States is behind all developed countries in the world. It's hovering around the same range as many developing countries, and we have hungry children. We have a higher rate of asthma amongst many groups within the United States that's clearly correlated with the kind of housing they live in, damp housing, housing that's exposed to rodents, housing that sits near diesel fumes. I think we need to ask ourselves very carefully what benefits can we derive from molecular tools that help us to individualize healthcare. But as we do so, we need to keep the big picture in front of us, what really matters in terms of healthcare. There are a lot of things that really matter in terms of the health of the US population that have relatively little to do with molecular discovery.
So I share that perspective, and I think it's really it's a mistake to conflate personalized medicine with genomics. I mean, first of all, what we really care about is phenotype. How does genomics translate into what's happening to our bodies? And from sequences of DNA to phenotype is a very long way. So we need a lot of data. And some of that data is going to be molecular, and there's a lot of promise in molecular data. So I would think that we think of personalized medicine in this way. It's really centered on a personalized data cloud. And the personalized data cloud has a lot of molecular information in it. So it would have your genomics is a big part of it, transcriptomics, metabolomics, all of that is important. But a lot of other information is also important. Information about what kind of environmental exposures you have, what's your social situation, what kind of stresses do you feel from problems like bad housing and all of that. So it's a large and rich and heterogeneous cloud of data that we can now develop to the point where it is useful. It's beginning to be very useful. And in the future, it's going to become even more useful. So the challenge of personalized medicine is how to utilize that data cloud. In terms of the molecular part of the component of that data cloud, I'd refer you to, there's a really interesting paper that just came out in Cell. It's got 40 authors. The lead author, the first one is Chen. And what they did in this paper is they developed a personalized data cloud focused on genomics and expression profiling and transcriptomics and all the things that can be done on a molecular basis to look at one individual and analyze that over time, over about 14 months. And the really interesting thing about this is that it really gave a very deep look into the physical status of this individual, who's Mike Snyder, who's I think the chairman of the genetics department at Stanford. And they were able to see that he has a problem that was never found before, susceptibility to type 2 diabetes. And that his networks actually started to move in that direction. It was triggered by a virus. So this kind of information will enable us to look deeply in what's happening into our bodies individually. And that's going to generate a lot of useful and actionable information. And it's going to be combined with all the other information that I just mentioned that can go into the personalized data clouds. The challenge for personalized medicine is how do we use it? And how do we do it carefully? And that's going to require a real change in the way we go about doing a lot of things, delivering health care to people generally. And there's two aspects of P4 medicine, we call it, or personalized medicine, that I'd like to mention. First of all, most people think of medicine as what goes on in the clinic, what goes on with doctors and nurses when you show up, when you're sick, when you have a symptom. But that's really only a very small part of healthcare. I wish I had this graph that appeared in an article by a fellow, Professor Schroeder, I think it was New England Journal of Medicine a few years ago, and he has a pie chart. And it has the determinants of health, and it has what goes on in the clinic and the medical system is 10%, behavior 40%, genomics 30%, and other things like that. What's really interesting is not the actual percentages, but the perception that what's happening in the clinic is only a small part of healthcare. So one of the most important aspects of personalized medicine is going to expand the healthcare system and move it out of the clinic. And that's centered on helping people to take the information that's in the personalized data cloud, converting that into simple, actionable information that they can use to better manage their health. And to better manage their health in a science-based, iterative, experimental way. So where you try new things and you see the effect and you change your course. That's not happening today. But personalized medicine will make that possible. The other aspect of personalized medicine that I'd like to mention is that it really gives us the opportunity to systematize and to accelerate innovation. Because as we expand medicine out of the clinic and into the home, and I'll talk a minute about how we think we can do that. It's not only going to give people information that they can use to manage their health, but it also gives us a way to gather a lot of information, to develop a community, so to speak, and develop new relationships between discovery science and clinical medicine and the communities that they serve. So these communities will now become participants in generating medical healthcare solutions. I shouldn't say medical health solutions. And in the process give a lot of data to discovery science to fuel omics studies. And my colleagues over at ISB who are in the thick of that work keep saying that one of their major problems is their studies are underpowered. They're really trying to deal with issues of biological complexity, and they can't get past all the noise and can't really see the signal on studies that are powered by 200 or 300 people. They need studies that are powered by thousands, tens of thousands of people to make the new potential of systems biology or a molecular focus on medicine to make that really possible. So what we're talking about is building relationships, community relationships that fuel that kind of innovation system. And so we get into a cycle of innovation where as we move information out of the clinic and into people for them to use to manage their health, we get more information which goes back to the clinic. We develop new insights on how to understand what's happening in our individual biologies, and that goes back out to the clinic, to the community, and it generates more information.